Tonight on America's Hope, anti-Israel protests continue to take place on college campuses throughout America. This evening, we'll be talking to famed attorney and law professor Alan Dershowitz about what he's doing about it. America's Hope starts right now. So good evening. Thank you for joining us on America's Hope, and we're glad that you could join us this hour. And wherever you are, we hope that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Something else that matters. What's going on our college campuses, many people are saying something has to be done. Combat Anti-Semitism, for example, has written this message to protesters saying, hey, protesters, try this. Instead of saying from the rivers to the sea, Palestinians must be free, they're challenging people to start saying from the river to the sea, support peace, hope, and dignity. And that's what our show is about tonight, supporting peace, hope, and dignity. We begin with my interview with Alan Dershowitz, the famed attorney and Harvard law professor, as he discusses with me his concerns about the protests and what he plans to do about it. Alan, as you see these protests continuing to take place throughout America, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, death to Israel, death to America, what is going through your mind as you watch all of this unfold?
Well, let's remember that the biggest supporters of these riots is Iran. The head of Iran wrote a letter commending these thugs, these Hitler youth who are calling for the end of the Jews. And of course, Iran would commend them. Hamas has commended them. And when you have Iran and Hamas on your side, you know you must be doing something very, very wrong. These are radical, anarchistic, anti-American young people who have no knowledge of what's going on. I'll give you an example. Some of the students are calling for a ceasefire. Do any of them know that Israel offered a ceasefire and that the Secretary of State said the only thing that stands between the civilians in Hamas and a ceasefire, the civilians in Gaza and a ceasefire, is Hamas? It's all Hamas's fault. The deaths are Hamas's fault. They use human shields. The hunger is Hamas's fault. They won't allow food to come in without them stealing it. But these kids are utter ignoramuses, and the faculty are the worst because they're the ones who have been propagandizing these kids for years and years and years. And now you have universities like Northwestern and Brown saying, we're going to give in to these people and we're going to hire more Palestinian professors, more supporters of Hamas. We're going to allow more people to come in as students. You don't give in to lawlessness in this way. You don't give in to terrorism. And what really concerns me, because I have experience in this, I represented a lot of the protesters in the 60s and 70s. These protesters, some of them, will become terrorists. They are being groomed by Hamas. Hamas will ask them to plant bombs. They will do it. And it's coming to a theater near you.
And that's what's frightening to so many people who are definitely aware of the threat from all of this that we're seeing on our college campuses, as well as in some cities like Dearborn, Michigan. Alan, I've got to ask you, as you stated in the past, you have been able to represent a lot of protesters, but let's go back even further than that. History looks like it's trying to repeat itself. If you go back to the pre-World War II and how people were stating that death to the Jews, and we saw people in Germany rising up, and even here in America, there were people siding with Nazis to say death to Jews. What's happening? A lot of people thought this was done away with after World War II and after the Holocaust, but it seems to be rearing its ugly head yet again.
It was temporarily done away with. Look, I live in an area of New York that's called Yorktown, and that area was a pro-Nazi area. There were people marching down the street with swastikas and yelling Heil Hitler. They brought thousands of them to Madison Square Garden. At the end of the 1930s, there were many, many American Nazis back in the day, and now their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are the new American Nazis. Now they're supporting Hamas, but there's not a big difference between the Hamas charter and Mein Kampf. In fact, I've coined a phrase for the Columbia campus. I call it Mein Campus. It's become a neo-Nazi campus, and there's no difference between neo-Nazis of the hard right and neo-Nazis of the hard left. We forget that Nazi stands for National Socialists. People claimed they were socialists. So whether you're an extremist on the right or an extremist on the left, the one target you almost always have is Jews. And they come for the Jews first, but as Elie Wiesel said, they're never the only ones, and it's coming to a theater near you.
Yeah, you know, I was just recently in Israel, as you and I talked about off camera, and I spoke with Natan Sharansky, who says this is out of the playbook of demonizing the victims and then trying to demoralize us and then denouncing us to make us disappear. What are you doing from your legal perspective to take action against those who have rallied to these protests, even threatening and actually physically harming some of the Jewish students attending these colleges?
Well, you know, I was Natan Sharansky's lawyer for 8 years when he was in a Soviet gulag for just speaking his mind. So I'm a strong supporter of free speech, and I would defend the rights of real pro-Palestinian students to have legitimate protests or circulate memoranda or petitions or anything like that. That's not what these people are doing. They're blocking access. They're demonizing, they're harassing, they're threatening Jews. We're starting a new group called Hurt a Jew, We Sue You, and we will sue individuals, not the universities. Others are doing that. But we will sue 19-year-old and 20-year-olds who are blocking access to classes, and we will sue them and get their scholarships, and we will sue them and get their cars. We will sue them and get their boom boxes. We will sue them for every penny they have, because you cannot get away with hurting a Jew today in America. And too many prosecutors are allowing them to get away. We don't control prosecutors, but we do control lawsuits. If we file a lawsuit, it has to go forward. And we will do that. We'll get discovery. We'll find out who's financing these protests. We'll find out the role of George Soros, the role of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, the role of Peter Beinart, who's on the Rockefeller Fund and doesn't believe Israel has the right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people. So we're going to get to the bottom of this through lawsuits. Look, I'm 85 years old. If I were 25, I'd be fighting in Gaza with Israel. I'm not. I'm 85, and all I can do is write books. I've written 55 of them, and write op-eds. I've written 1,000 of those, and speak on shows like yours.
Alan, and I'm grateful for you speaking to us. This is such an important time in our history, a pivotal point in our history. And as you talked about, you're fearful of the fact that we might see some of these protesters turn into terrorists and bombs start erupting on, well, anywhere in America. We have a porous southern border, as you know, where people have come into this country illegally. They might be co-opted to do some things as well. I've got to ask you, as you look at the lay of the land, what can Americans do to prevent these kinds of possible scenarios from unfolding that we might be witnessing our own October 7th and revisiting 9/11?
Well, there's short-term and long-term. Long-term, we have to get rid of DEI, this diversity, equity, inclusion, where everybody's either an oppressor or oppressed, where the world is divided. That's what stimulates all of this anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism. In the short term, we have to make a distinction between people who are just exercising their First Amendment rights and people who are breaking the law. And anybody who breaks the law and violates the rules of the university should be expelled, and permanently expelled, and not admitted to universities. You may have a right to say, I want the Jews subjected to genocide, but you have no right to be a Columbia student. And I don't want my child or your child sitting next to somebody in a classroom who's calling for the genocide of my people. You're entitled to an environment where people are not calling for rape, murder, October 7th, 10,000 October 7ths. We have the right to a campus where people are allowed to learn, not be harassed and intimidated, threatened, and beaten up.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far of America's Hope. If you'd like to see it in its entirety, just click on the link below. Thanks for watching.